Welcome to the Successful Life Podcast. I'm your host, Corey Barrier, and I am here with my man, Al Levy. What's up, Al?
Hey, I'm here. And you didn't even ask, and you pronounced my name right. Corey, that's pretty impressive.
I appreciate that. Well, I did go through your entire book. I don't know how many times you said your name in the book, but I have gone through your book a couple of times, which, by the way, fantastic job. It really has helped me understand more about the internal things that are going on in these trade companies that I would otherwise not have known.
Yeah, I had a front row seat for a lot of years. And coming from a family business, I was third generation. In a family business, especially contracting, by the time you're 8, you're doing something. You're emptying waste cans, cleaning the toilets, riding along with somebody to help or whatever you need to do. And my dad, that was the way we got to see our dad. There's a common story in multi-generational contracting businesses. If you wanted to see your parents, you get in the truck and go with them because they're at work every minute.
Well, I mean, look, I think that probably gave you a heck of an education, right?
Oh, I was very lucky. I mean, it was very stressful. So there's never been a reason why I didn't pick my tagline when I went off to form this business. My tagline has always been less stress, more success. And the reason I always share that is I was making a ton of money. It was a pretty good life, except the stress was killing me. I mean, killing me.
In
And
what
I
way?
knew, yeah, well, one of the more physical ways, I was 246 pounds. Today, I'm 190. And I was eating my stress. That'd be a minor way to say it. All addictions find their root, right? And, working crazy hours, we were not a small company. We were 17 million, 70 people. But me and my brother Richie, who was really the outside guy, my brother Marty was the inside guy, and all these things. And me and Richie would be the last 2 techs standing at the end of the night, in 25 techs. And at 2 a.m., we would have the most ridiculous but most important conversations in our office at that time. Or frankly, because we lived in New York, a diner, because we hadn't eaten all day.
That's hilarious. That's wild. So and that really brings me to just one of the most fascinating things about you is that you planned out the 3 years, and we'll get to that, or I'd actually like for you to talk about that. I just thought that was really, most people don't plan anything out for 3 years. I mean, that was just really thoughtful of you. So I'd love for you to share, a little bit about that.
Well, people know that I'm a systems guy, all about planning, and I am. But I was not born this way. I was a mess. And people look, no, go, yes, I was a mess. So like most people talk about, your weakness can become your strength. I was in high school, and my stepmom, who basically raised me because my mom passed away when I was very young. And she had been a high school teacher, and she looked at me and she goes, you cannot go away to college like this. Because I had no study habits. I would try to do something and get frustrated, and I would just quit. And she said, you have to change your habits. And that really began the beginning of this path of beginning to get ahead of it instead of run over by it. And then I had a lot of great mentors in my life that said if I didn't start doing this about looking up, I was going to end up in a dead end that I don't want to be in. But we all do that as owners because there's just so much chaos moment to moment. And, it just overwhelms you. So you got your blinders on. And there's times to wear the blinders and there's times to take them off. But if you don't take those blinders off periodically, you're going to do just what I was. You're just going to keep on walking until you go off the cliff. And so you need to pull up and learn how to plan ahead. So I had gotten really good at it. And I knew the time had come. I was thinking to myself that I believe firmly in these systems and that I wanted to go off and help the industry. And I knew I could work with any contractor beyond the plumbing, heating, cooling, electric that we were in at that point, and make a difference in their lives and their customers' lives and the company life. Because I don't believe I just come to help the owner. I help all three. I help their customers have a better experience, the company go and grow, and then, yes, for them to have their life back, which was my goal for myself originally. I wanted my life back, Corey. I wanted my life back.
It's really easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, the going to the job, hustling, going from one job to the next, and not paying attention to the little things. And I just got finished talking to Ishmael just a couple hours ago. Very similar story. He was a total mess. until I don't remember who he said came in. I can't remember now who he said came in and helped
I
him.
think it was a Tom from Service Titan. I know he's had a lot of great people, but yeah, Tom,
Yeah,
I think, was
him.
one of his big guys.
Yeah, and Ken Haynes, I believe, is another one. Yeah, so let me ask you something. I just want to go back for a second. Do you remember what mentor really got that to sink in when you said that you were a mess and you had somebody said you had to straighten up? Now there was a series of people, but which one do you know?
Yeah, no, I would say, first of all, the biggest mentor in my life was my dad. I was very lucky to have a very enlightened dad who was really good about coaching myself and my two older brothers. We used to be in business meetings with him, and his rules of the game was you can sit in the back and listen. You can make any notes you want, but don't interrupt. I hate to say it was like Godfather, but I guess it was. And so we're in the back, stuff that as we go. And at the end, he would be patiently answer what questions you have, what do you want to know? Because we were serial entrepreneurs. We were in a lot of things besides the home heating business. We were a radiant heat manufacturer. We owned a chain of liquor stores. We had dairy stores. We had multi-state real estate. But my father was very clear. Our focus is on the golden goose. So what was the golden goose? It's the business. But we were concentrated only in fuel oil for very many years. So fuel oil heating, for those who don't know, because typically in the Northeast, think of propane, where you have trucks deliver, they burn it, they use it, service it. That was our model. But I could see that things were beginning to change, and that if we didn't change with it, our business, our lives would be changing. And handing it over to the fourth generation, which is my nephew now, who's full-time, with my middle brother who's still there, that would not have been able to happen, in my opinion. And really the catalyst, Corey, was one day I just looked up. Remember I talked about taking off your blinders? And I just looked ahead and I said, if we don't get into the trades that our own customers who love us want us to do, they're going to have to go outside of us and find someone else. And then we will be locked out of our own customer's basement. And we're not having that. So we had to really master some things. And that's where the system journey takes place.
That's really fascinating insight that you had. Because, what age were you at this time? You were young, right?
I was, like to say there's series of things, right? I would say when I arrived officially about 20, I guess I was 22 years old. By the time I hit 25, I had learned a lot of lessons. One of the lessons that I always remember, and that's why I said my dad was so great. I'm in the office. It's probably like 6 o'clock at night. We're in New York City Union Shop. And then there's a guy at the door who has to be at least 50 years old. And he wants to come in and meet with me. And what does he want to talk about? Not the work. He wants to talk about his personal life and how are things affecting at home. And it's just like a confessional, and he's asking for advice. And so when he left, I said to my dad, I go, what's with this? He goes, well, here's what I need to tell you. Because you sit in this office, you are their parent in many ways, at least a big brother. And so they're coming to you for that. Most of us have grown up in a dysfunctional family in one way or another. And not passing judgment, sometimes we're very lucky. But the reality is, one of the great reasons people came to work with us and stayed for as long as it was is because we were a supportive family environment that they didn't grow up with, that they sorely missed and wanted to be a part of. So that was an enlightening thing. Also at 25, my brother Richie and I are at some seminar, Corey, and the guy on the stage is talking about, and this is, decades ago, and the guy on the stage is going, the average age of the tech is going to be 50. Well, when you're a 25-year-old and you're thinking about 50-year-olds being out in the field running calls and thinking, oh my. So my brother and I got busy, building a very rude, crude training center so we could train them up. So we'd be able to break this mold a little bit and get some younger staff in. But we learned a lot of lessons. And the way we typically learn lessons in this field is we fall into a big hole. And then the best of us crawl out of it. And the very best of us, Corey, don't go back into the same hole right away. Because most people, the inclination is you're out, you go, oh, that hurt. And boom, you're back in the same hole again. There's plenty of holes ahead. And I was lucky enough to, again, have great mentors, but myself as well, that I'm not going back in this hole. I'm going to fix this so that we can move forward.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Look, it's lessons. We learn lessons in life. I don't think about things as mistakes. I haven't always thought this way, but I do look at these things as lessons. And my God, I've learned some pretty hard ones, but they're the most memorable. The ones that hurt the most, right? When you lost the most money or you lost whatever, fill in the blank. Those are the times that you remember, or the times that you had to work your ass off to get out of that hole. And
Oh,
those times, I think,
I
make our
totally
character.
agree. Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree. I didn't appreciate it. Let's be clear. At the time, I didn't want a life lesson. I didn't want a business lesson. But when I talk about investing, there were times we invested and we made a lot of money, and that's really nice. There were times we invested, tried something new, and we broke even. Still good. There were times we invested or did something new and we lost our shirt. And so, but I will tell you, we learned our most valuable lessons when that would occur. It didn't stop us from doing things again. It just awakened us to how to do it better. What did we miss? What could we have done better? And just do that same diagnostic. Most of us, I don't know that we do that. We're so busy with the next hole that we're going to fall into. So that was when you asked about the 3 years. I was 45 at the time. I had already been in the business 23 years full time. That doesn't count all the times that when I was in school where I was driving trucks and learning the trade, all these things, doesn't count any of it. So I've been in full time, and I realized, now that I had this stability, we had everything I talk about in the 7 powers in place, and we had this ability to take young, willing apprentices with no skills to willing techs with great skills, and then even further on to the best field supervisors you could ever have. We had that skill, and that skill freed us up. And then we could do what I'll talk about in a minute, which is how could we have added these other trades? So if that's something you want me to talk about, I'm happy to dive in.
I definitely do, because I think, I want you to, from a couple of perspectives. I'd like for you to talk about that from the perspective of obviously your own, and then also of what could have gone sideways if you hadn't have put some of these things in place before you decided to make that move. If that's, I can't remember exactly how it went, but I think that is correct.
Yeah, no, these things were in place, but I knew that I needed, as I was leaving, even though we were a big company, my name was in a lot of boxes. And so my job was to hire really good people that I trusted, to put my brothers and my dad in good shape when I left. And I needed some training time to them. I actually taught the people who had attended my class, who had now risen to the top levels of our company, how to do my training, because I had done it for 20 years. They came in and took the reins from me. One year I was doing it. They were in the back doing the same thing I had done as a kid, taking notes. The next year was like we were debriefing it, and then they were up in the front and I was grading them. And then I let them do the class to see the results, and they were doing great. But I needed to find, people to take the place that could work these systems and continue the process forward. I've been gone 20 years and they haven't lost a beat. Things are different.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what? They're still pretty darn impressive.
How hard was it? I mean, you had a plan. So I keep thinking about this. Like, if it were me, I wouldn't have had that good of a plan. But what could have happened if if a business owner is listening to this, and maybe he's sitting at $5 million, and I can't remember how much you guys were at, but let's just say this in 2023,
about 17 million back then, which was big back then. Nowadays, the numbers are staggering.
Yeah, for sure. And so, but if let's say you are at 5 million and you're hearing this and you think, well, I need to add another service because I have, what formula would you use or did you use to map that out?
So we got really good at what we're good at, which was the fuel oil business, which is what we did is we created the operating manuals for that business alone. And we hired in my friend who's an industry writer, Dan Holohan, to help write it and run all these meetings, which is why it cost us in today's money about $150,000. And it was a fraction of what I have today. But that was so big in taking control and building the foundation of what we needed to take care of. I had already worked through other things like how to plan and execute before I always tell the story is I was coming off the road, working during the day, and I needed a project done. And I went desk to desk to ask for help, Corey. Nobody could help me because they were too busy. So I just blew a gasket. I said, well, grab everything you have. This is a paper moment. Come into the office, conference room. I said, put it on the desk. So this giant mound of paper is there. And we started to sift through it. And what we found out is two people were working on a project and neither one knew that the other one was working on it. Or they were working on what they felt was absolute my number one priority. And I wasn't even clear that it was for me, let alone a priority. So we worked through this pile, and that's where that birth of the master project, top 30, top 5 got to, and then making the top 5 come alive. Because you're going to have a crazy week. I don't care what size you are, that 5 million or whatever. I mean, tell me that everything just runs great. You can sit on a beach in Hawaii for a month and you come back, everything's perfect. If you can, stop listening. You mastered it. Yeah, but I doubt it because it wasn't that way for me. So the point of this is we began to put the systems that scale up. I've only worked with 2 types of companies, really family business or really good partners that work together. They're well liked by people. They scale up and they hit the top of the roof, which means that they can't clone themselves. There are no more hours in a day, days in a week, weeks in a month. They just run out of time. So they need the same system or foundation, if you will, which I call the 7 blocks. And that's really what they have to do to put a platform under their company as it exists today and then springboard forward. And the other ones are great companies like Tommy, who could already generate great calls when I showed up. You know, he's 15 million and not making any money, but he knew how to make the phone ring. The bad news is it's one thing to make the phone ring, but if you can't handle it, all you're doing is just ticking off more new customers and you're just blowing everything out of the way and you're unprofitable and you're just digging a deeper hole. So they too need the same 7 systems so that they take control of the company they've already built and then are able to 10 times it with no problem, which Tommy is a great example of doing exactly that. And a lot of money at the same time. That's 2 things, not just great sales and nothing behind it.
It's phenomenal. And it's fascinating because, you know, you're 100% right. If you have systems and processes in place, is a repeatable, I mean, and as you mentioned, Tommy's a great example. It's just rinse and repeat at this point.
Yeah, no, he's always innovating. So because I know rightfully so, Tommy has a ton of people follow him as they should, in my opinion. He's one of the rarest people in that with all this growth, Tommy has not changed that much as a person. You know, I think that's really, and it's everybody go, well, I cannot is available. Well, that's just the way it is. There's a million things to do, but his heart is still phenomenal and he still cares about people. You know, Corey, when I left my job at 48, I didn't need to work. So people ask, well, why are you doing this for the last 20 years? I believe firmly that if you've been given a gift, you are obligated to give back. Now, I got paid for that and it was good, but I got to tell you, the money wasn't just for me. The money was for you. Because if you don't put time, energy, and money in, my dad had a great line. He said, sometimes what you get for free isn't worth what you paid for it.
He's right.
And it's very true. You have to have skin in the game. And so this investing of your time, energy, and money. Now, money is important, but it's not the most scarce asset. Even time you can leverage. It's really about where are you going to spend what I came to call my emotional dollars. So in my wallet, I woke up this morning with only so many emotional dollars. How, when I get to my office, is the best way to spend it? I'll give the example that I always recall. So we were in this awful building that we had been in. It was urban renewal, wiped out our customer base. We had already moved to go service where they had moved to, but we were in this still terrible place. And people were, how bad was it? I go, well, we used to have to drive 2 miles to get to a restaurant, and we're in New York City. And so, yeah, no, it was awful. They were stripping cars in our yard. We had boarded up every window, door, and gate because they broke through it. And we even made the gates breakaway so that we wouldn't have to put them back on. Finally, the final straw about how bad it was, they drove a truck through the side of the cinder block building. And I just said to my family, we're out. We got to go. That's why I became so good at office design.
Who's they?
They, as far as I told my brothers. Oh,
No, no,
I was talking about the criminal element that was alive and well in New York City in 1990.
was
It was
this
the
just
70s,
random
70s,
criminal
80s, and
acts?
90s was very bad in New York City.
Wow.
People who go to New York City, mid 90s to 2015, that's not the New York City that I grew up in. It was what I envisioned the Wild West when I would look at that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was crazy, really bad.
It's really different now too. Have you been back recently?
I haven't been back. My family that still lives there tells me about the homeless problems, but that's really, frankly, every city. It's a
Sure.
shame. I don't know too many cities where, because we're in these groups, we talk where it's not much of a problem. But even here, where I'm out in Scottsdale, it's just the nature. There's a big problem, and that's something that's really shocking to me living here in America. Is that, but we're an addicted society, and I don't exclude myself from that. Gambling, drugs, alcohol. There's a whole lot of ways we can go dark, isn't there?
There really is.
Yeah.
And I have an answer. I have actually, and I can't base this on 100% facts, but whoever was telling this story, they knew what they were talking about. They were qualified. This is what they said was happening with the homeless. I'm really shocked this conversation went this way, but that you would be shocked, and I don't remember the percentage of the money that supposedly goes to the homeless foundations or the whatever homeless from the government. Really, majority of that money is paid out to people that are on the board, like of the committees. And so they say it's pretty staggering from what I understand.
I don't know all of it, but yeah, it's unfortunately a bit of trickle down. And, just because it's a nonprofit doesn't mean people aren't getting paid. But we're not going to solve that problem. So I'm going to redirect back to our problem today.
For sure.
Yeah. And if you have an addiction, and I don't know who doesn't, we're tough in the contracting trade. Well, frankly, I don't know how you can make it. It takes a certain level of thick skin. But unless you reach out for help, it's really a tough thing to do. And we all need help. I didn't lose weight on my own. I didn't get to the problem for my addiction until I finally faced the fact that I was eating my stress and, what I was doing to myself. And, obviously people with alcohol and drug, there's no shortage to addictions, gambling, there's a bunch of these things. But back to you as contractors. If we allow our business to run us instead of us run our business, we open ourselves up to these issues, in my opinion, in a much bigger way. But if we learn to take control of ourselves and of our business in a structured way, that allows us to break free and to get our life back, which was my goal. So the story that Tommy always tells is because I told him at the beginning, I had 2 young daughters, and I told my wife I'm going to be home less, which you can imagine went over really well.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
I wasn't home that often as it was. But I told her the reason is because I was going to focus on being able to take young, willing apprentices with no skills to willing techs with great skills. And that's 2 years from now. We're going to be on vacation, and they're not going to be bothering my phone all day long. Because that's what happened. Anytime I was, quote unquote, off, they'd be calling me all the time. And, just multiply. People think, the bigger my company gets, it'll all be fixed. I'm here to say, no, it will not. It's just more gasoline to a fire if that's what you're thinking is going to fix your company. So I did all the things, which is we wrote the manuals. Then we built the training center, which was our mistake the first time, based on what was in the table of contents in the manuals, building the right hands-on training center. And then we learned how to become better trainers, and we created training curriculum. So as I mentioned before, I could train those who I had trained to run the classes. I wasn't the only one. My whole mindset began to think is, if one person can do it, it's a hobby. If all of us can do it, well, then it's something we do.
Dude, 100%. And it was just it was the best thing that you could have done. It's just like an integrator, right? A lot of people in the right, it's sort of the same thing. And I admire that clear focus.
You're speaking to Gino Wickman, just so we're clear. Is that Gino Wickman's Rocket Fuel?
You
Yes,
got it.
Tommy made me read the book. I didn't even know those two terms existed because there was nobody to my right or left. I had to be both. But I did come to understand that not everybody is both. And then if you can find this marriage between the visionary, the one who can, what I used to say, Corey, years ago is I could see in partnerships many times, there's a person who can see a mile down the road as to where they want the company to be. And then there's an integrator who's really good about knocking out a block at a time. But the problem is the visionary is looking this way and the integrator is walking this way. My goal was to put them together in a united fashion and then a systematic approach to get to the where we wanted to be in that vision.
Yes. I think that, first of all, you're a unicorn. You're right. It is interesting because I don't know too many people that are both, but I know they're out there for sure. I am certainly the visionary. I can see, like this project that I talked to you about. Like I can see, I can sit and I can map out exactly where these things are going to go in my brain. Now, for me to be able to tell you all that stuff, it's going to be maybe a little bit jumbled. But visually, I understand exactly how we're going to get there. And so, fortunately, I have the person that's going to, that understands the things I don't want to understand, right? It's important to understand. It's important to know that about yourself. And so, anyhow.
I totally agree with that. And, the idea that I don't learn anything is a ridiculous session. I'm still learning today. And the day I stopped learning, my dad and my aunt, who was brilliant, they said, the day you stop learning, you're done. And I don't mean in a good way.
That's right. That's right. Because you got to keep the sharp. And that's what happens. People retire and they go do the thing they thought they were supposed to do, which is sit around and do nothing. And that's a quick way to the grave.
I actually got a front row seat to what you're speaking to because at my shop, because we were a union shop, they really had a great pension, which was another reason they stayed in. And then they thought to themselves, well, I love fishing. I'll go fishing every day. No, I love golf. I'll do that every day. No. The ones who lasted the most are people that either had, like they had a charity or they wanted to work with a religious institution. They had somewhere to go and a calling for whatever they were going to do. Or even they just worked a couple of days with us because it was great that they were around. They were actually inspirational to all the younger staff. We had one guy, his name is Louis. He was an incredible fabricator, welder. My brother Richie and I used to meet him out to fix our trucks because we had the big tanker trucks and he'd be working outdoors. And so we find out that he's closing up and he and his partner are splitting and he's going to close the door. And Richie and I go talk to him out in the cold in Brooklyn. And he said, Lou, we'd love you to come to work. And he starts to laugh. He goes, I'm 68. So I said, well, you know what? Come work a year or two. Let's just see how it goes. Well, the end of this story is he was 90 and still productive every day that he worked at our company, every day. And anybody else who felt like slacking, they just took, he was just such a positive, everything that radiated him, including his skill set. Finally, we just said, you know what, Lou, you can't go on these ladders anymore. We're just not going to let that happen. Yeah.
I think that is that's a killer story. And it's a great inspirational story for anybody listening because look, and even if you're not 90 years old, if you're 20 years old and you're sitting around and you're not out walking or moving around or getting some sort of exercise, look, it's going to be a hard life. I'm just going to tell you right now, look, I was a fat kid. I've been sober for 13 and a half years. I've done a few bad shit in my life. I've had to go through a few things. But look, the other side of it, I promise you, is better. It sucks getting there, but it's just like starting a business. That part's not really that fun after the newness wears off, which wears off real quick.
Yeah, it's all exciting. I don't have to work for that boss anymore, my own boss. And then pretty soon when you're your own boss, we all make the mistake is I'm going to buy a white truck. I'm going to sell it $5 cheaper than he does. I'm going to work out of my house. I'm going to make a ton of money. Some people do, but most don't. 9 out of 10 will fail. Because if you're not set up to be in business and you don't even know what it is, because you were fed a fish over and over again, you never learned how to fish in a business sense while you were a great tech. And so there's so many lessons to be learned. Now there's great books, there's great blogs, there's great Facebook groups, but this gets to the other point, Corey, that I always speak to. And I speak to it actually in the book as well, which is if you pluck stuff from all over and think it's all going to fit together, here's what I promise you. No, it will not. It will not. You're either on your way to building a Frankenstein or what I used to call a junk car, which is a Ford chassis, Hyundai engine, Toyota seats. It doesn't work. And so having an integrated approach, or at least a platform, which is what I stress to people, these 7 blocks or whatever you buy into is that structure, then you can begin to sift all the great information. Because as great as the internet is, as great as Facebook is, and great as all these things, and I firmly believe they are, you're still at the same problem. Are you speaking or listening to a genius or an idiot? And so that's the problem. You have to be your own filter and your own metric, and you have to have a system that allows you to sift through that stuff.
I agree, 100% agree. And I often wonder, and I'm sure you've probably wondered the same, when you see people ask a question, it's just a general question, whatever it is, and you hear a litany of answers. And I'm like, you don't know the context of the question. You got to ask this guy more questions before you start firing off. You need to go hire a marketing company. Like, you don't know the guy's situation. And so, as cliche as it may be, like, it always depends. And you got to ask that question first.
That's when I first started this business, I went to my friends and I said, tell me what you don't like about consultants. Well, let's just say it was a long and passionate list. And what they said is they never go away. They're always doing or selling something. And then they don't have anything that works without them. They're always the one that have to make it work. And if they're not there, then they really haven't done anything for you. And then, there's just this whole mix of things so my goal was to bring these systems in that work because I've taught you how to work them. And when I'm gone, I don't need to be the one that's coming back to make it all work. And so I continue my relationship with so many of my clients at this point. It's all free. My goal wasn't to become their consultant for life, but many have, stayed. They like the arrangement. And, I'm so proud of so much of the success that they have done. And they're really grateful, Corey, to me, and, about how much that I helped them. But I will tell you, I pretty much have the same information, which means that I know how to teach you how to use a shovel, how to dig a hole. I will even demonstrate it. But then you have to pick up the shovel, and then you have to dig a hole, and you have to keep on digging the holes, and then you have to make bigger holes. So really the credit is for them for being willing to get on my hip and learn the lessons and move forward so that they can be self-sufficient and create this whole platform within their own company, no matter where they want to go, no matter what they want to do.
Dude, best piece of advice you could have given on here, really, because, if somebody just hears that and actually does what you just said, then it'll change their whole life.
My hope is, I know, like I said, going back to the beginning, mentors changed my life. And I never forget that if not for my mentors, this old body would be in a basement turning wrenches late in the night. And that's not a pretty sight. And so, so many of them, but obviously my dad was always a great business coach. And to his credit, my brothers and I would come up with, ideas to modernize the business, move into different areas. He just wanted us to talk it through with him. So he understood. But he's, basically said, I brought you here not to just listen to what I have to say, but, to go ahead and move this business ahead. And he let us make mistakes. But he would say in the meeting what his thoughts were. It wasn't like after it all fell apart, he would come out of the woods and, smack us around. And that's very discouraging. If you're in a family business together, one of the best things I could advise to you is to get together. And if you can't do it on your own, get yourself, a moderator or somebody that can be arbitrary to this thing so that you can work as a family group. So as I was leaving my business, I know this is a long way back to the 3-year story, but when I was leaving my business, here's what I was firm about. Money's money, but these are, and I told this to my brothers. I said, you are always going to be my brothers. And I love you to death. And you are the uncles to my daughters, and that will always be. So the three of us have to figure out how to make this work, because we're going to be at Thanksgiving dinner together and we're going to enjoy the fact that we do. And I can tell you 20 years on, we are closer than we have ever been. Now, people go, well, that's because you're not there. Oh, well, my friends, you do not know enough, because these kinds of things just end up being an atomic bomb and people will never talk to one another again. How many stories do you know like that? Tons of
So
it.
many.
We worked on the personal part of it as well as the business part of it to make sure. And again, I wasn't going to leave him, but it was also selfish. And I told my brothers selfishly, I'm going to make sure all these systems are in place, and I'm going to make sure the right people are here so that I'm not coming back, because I'm going to be working on my business and you're going to be in a good place from here on out. And you know what? 20 years down the road, they are.
Tremendous. You know, the personal relationships, you keeping that personal relationship with them probably, well, without a doubt, set you up. And look, that can be with anybody. It doesn't just have to be with family members, but while we're on family members, it's usually a pretty interesting dynamic with family members. It's really an interesting dynamic, because usually well, I can't say usually, sometimes it's not the person you think you should be talking to. Sometimes it's somebody you don't even realize in the background that can mess things up for you.
Yes. Well, my father was really good about keeping our spouses out of the business. He told us very early. And he goes, and then we had buy-sells, and because, we didn't want to be we love our sister-in-laws, but we didn't want to be partners with them, and they didn't want to be in the business. And if the kids wanted to come in, we had to already put plans into how to do it the right way. So I've worked with a lot of clients to help them introduce their kids into the business the right way versus the destructive ways that can happen. The interesting part to me, though, is I've worked with a lot of partners that were as close as brothers could ever be, because they had this dream together. They started in the truck together. They went off and built this business. And, but so even if you're not blood related, you act like you're blood related. You hang together, you do stuff together. I just did a quick video on one of those things about, you can only have one set of hands on the steering wheel. You can all be in the car. You can all participate, but one person needs to do it. So there's a great company I worked up in Rochester, and she had the control of the car. That didn't mean everybody else sat in the car like you're a kid, where you shut up and don't say anything. They participated, but ultimately one person is in charge of steering the car. So in that relationship, you guys need to decide how to make that work. Because if everybody's grabbing for the steering wheel, I'm going to tell you it's bad. Actually, it reminds me of a story. Is that when we were young, we were in our 20s by the time I arrived in, and my brothers and I spent more time doing this, banging heads. And we were micromanaging each other and critiquing each other. You follow how that goes.
Ugh.
And my father was very, not like, he was much quieter. And he grew up on a farm, which I always laugh, because the farm was in New York City. That's how long ago it was. Anyway, so he says to us, boys, I was thinking that if we all get on the same side of the car and push, we're going to go a lot further and a lot faster. And he walks out of the room. And myself and Richie and Marty look at each other like, what? And then we go, oh, we have to stop banging heads. So that was the informal, okay, you know what, Marty, you do this. Richie, you do this. Al, you do this. And then it was already better because of this illustration, conversation, tiebreaker, you call it whatever you like. Now, I have to tell you, Corey, there's a lot of businesses I worked with that ultimately we paid family members to stay home because they were so destructive.
I absolutely believe that.
Yes.
And probably paid them a handsome salary to stay home, and it was probably well worth it.
If need be, yeah. I do believe that a really well-constructed buy-sell is critical. And unfortunately, in my family life, it came up with my dad and my uncle. My uncle passed away. They had a buy-sell, but it wasn't kept up often enough. It wasn't objective enough, and it didn't really hold up. But working with Ellen Rohr, who was my co-consultant, we did work on a lot of jobs. And we also worked in the Zoom Drain franchise with the great Jim Cornetti. is that we're big believers in the 5 Ds for a well-written buy sell, which means it addresses disaster. So the area gets wiped off the face of the earth, like Hurricane Sandy almost did to our company. Debt, who's putting money in, who's not. And then, or how far do we dig a hole? Divorce. Now you have a divorce, that affects things. But if you and I don't want to work together, and if I have to spend one more minute in this office with you, I'm going to kill myself. Sorry for being dramatic. But the reality is we need a divorce from one another. We got to go off and do our own thing. So debt, death, divorce, disability. Disability is the one that I missed here. Disability is, heaven forbid, you get hurt in a way that you can't perform. It's bad on you. It's bad on your family, but it also leaves us in a lurch in the business. So we have to be able to address these things. So 5 Ds, it's something that I always talk about. You need to do it. And then it has to be reviewed at least once a year and signed off on, or it's really not going to be that parachute that all of you need.
That's right. It's not something you want to sweep under the rug. What's interesting, the divorce part, I think that's where I believe that when most partners get together, they think, just like I have thought in the past, this is never going to end. It's never going to end. This is the end of the day. Like, this is it. This is my last thing.
Honey, I love you. We'll always be together. To be half kidding, I'm married 45 years. And young people always ask, how did you do that? I go, it's pretty easy. I married a woman who's as stubborn as me. We both thought each other would quit, and here we still are. but it is, it's really core values I know it's oversaid, but my wife and I have always had core values that are aligned. We're very different people. And I don't believe that if you're both big talkers, there's not enough space. And if nobody's a social, then that's going to be a problem. But whatever it is, more open dialogue, which, by the way, I can tell you, this is actually backwards. The better I became at my own company as a leader and a trainer and all the other things, I actually became a better father and a better husband because I stopped talking all the time. And I started to listen to them answer my questions without me preparing my defense or correcting them. And it really deepened that relationship. But I didn't learn it that way. I learned it by working with young staff.
Another huge takeaway, active listening. And the exact same thing happened to me. This has just been recently. And I'll tell you a quick story. I've been sober a little over 13 years. And I went to AA for 6 years and decided, I'm just summing this up for you. My ego got too big and I decided I didn't need to go back. So I didn't. And long story short, I was having a conversation with a guy, I think it was back in October maybe. And he'd been in recovery about the same amount of time. And I was explaining to him my reason, which was I didn't want to say I am an alcoholic, because if you say I am, the words that fall after that, it was really silly. It's not silly, I suppose, but it was a silly reason for me to, it was just an excuse, to be honest. And so what I realized in that conversation with this gentleman is, he said, Corey, I've had some of those same feelings. He said, but maybe it's not about you. And I'm like,
that is so good.
Yeah.
That is so good.
Well, he said, Corey, you have a lot of influence. He said, and you're literally pissing it away by not having these conversations. And I'm like, he's right. So I went back to AA the next day, and my life has significantly gotten better because I'm back on, I'm back in the groove, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. And that's what I was saying is, part of the problem, what makes us great as contractors is we're independent, we're hard thinking, we're hardworking, we're all of this. So when it comes to our personal lives, like I said, food is an addiction, alcohol, drugs, you name it, gambling, all of it is an addiction. Why is the addiction is really more of the problem. It's not the activity you chose to satiate that. It's the why. And what are the triggers? Because we all have triggers. I always laugh because I think about how bad was, my eating problem. Well, I used to route my day so that I would end at my favorite Italian deli so I could get a meatball sub if I could work the right stops in the right direction. That's when you know you have a problem. The second way I know I had a problem is I was in a restaurant in New York City, and I'm 6'2", and the guy looks at me at the the maitre d' and goes, "So what football team do you play for?" You know what? These bumps in the road as we see them, or these obstacles that we do. Ellen has a great line that she shared with me. Whether, depending on your own beliefs, great beyond. But Ellen said to me, she knows sometimes the Lord uses a feather to get your attention, but if you're not listening, he will use a brick.
Yeah, 100%. But here's the thing about that. That is one of the hardest things not hardest things, but that's one of the lessons recently it really just ties right into it. That's the reason I didn't go back, is my relationship with God or whatever you believe, but my, higher power, whatever it is, I really didn't realize I didn't realize how much I had gotten away from that. And so that's really the part in not to go into grave detail, but there's some events that happened with my daughter. And that's what it took, all those things, for me to realize, look, she's 13. There's nothing I can do about what she's going to do. And it's taken me quite a long time to realize that. But once I realized that, my life has been significantly better, because I don't stress about stupid stuff that I have zero control over. Zero control.
And this is such a great topic, and a pretty good way for us to come back to is pretty much every client that I worked with was a control freak. How do I know? Because I am one.
Yep.
Pretty much they're a perfectionist. How do I know? Because I was one. Here's the thing. When I was in Weight Watchers, and I was there more times than I'd like to count, I had a really good teacher, and she said, look around this room. Everyone in this room is a perfectionist. And I'm looking at all of us that are heavy. And I'm going, how is this perfect? She goes, you are attached to perfectionism. So when you eat a candy bar, all of a sudden perfection's gone. And now you're just going to stuff your face to make up for all the sins that you did. And then you'll start again. The famous thing was always like, Monday, I'll start my diet again on Monday, as if you could control that. And all of us have our different things. But my point for you guys here is that you've got to let go of perfectionism. And until I did, and I learned a very good phrase for myself. At the end of the day, I said to myself, good enough for today. I'll make it better tomorrow, because I had to be able to leave it. Or otherwise, I was always building my perfect dream car that never got on the highway. And any car on the highway is going to beat my dream car in my garage.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. Lots of times you just have to put one foot in front of the next. And that is a great point. I think, and I work from home. So, like, Lord have mercy. I'm not saying that it's necessarily worse, but maybe because it's not like I have a cutoff. It's not like I could step out one door into another. I mean, physically, I suppose, in my office, but we're in the same building, or the same house. So it is sometimes really hard to differentiate. I can't say that word. Forget it. I won't even.
Yeah, because I'm such a wordsmith.
Oh, well, hey.
I'm such a wordsmith. I have two editors, my wife and Helena, who edited my book for me. Yeah, that's how good I am.
Yeah, no chance I edited it. Yeah, I certainly had somebody do my book.
I'm dyslexic. Well, so. I'm dyslexic. And
are you really?
Yeah. All of us. A lot of contractors are dyslexic.
A lot of them have ADHD, which is why I actually love working with them. So really, I'm dead serious. Think about this. I cuss a lot. Tamp it down here, but I still
came
cuss
to
a lot.
New York, and I cussed a lot. And then when I got trained to be what I did, they said you can't curse anymore. So I had to come up with words that are close to it, like cover your anatomy.
100%. But you got to be able to read the room too. And I know that when you're in the presence of somebody that you can have
colorful. Yeah. Let's go with colorful. Yeah.
Yes, for conversation, and I've not always been able to read the room. Sometimes I for sure have not read the room.
Corey, you and I both love sales. and I was
Yeah.
great at sales. And the only reason I got good at all this other stuff is because my team blew it up. So I had to come back and do all this other stuff. But I really was awful at sales. People laugh because they've seen me on stage and I've taught so many people how to be good at sales. It is a very learnable skill if you can do it in a systematic way. And of course, I have a systematic way that I taught people how to do sales, but I did everything wrong. I stared at my feet. I was shy. I muttered, never made eye contact, just everything you could do wrong till I finally learned how to do everything right. But it's one step in front of the other. Isn't like I'm awful at sales and tomorrow I'll be the best salesperson ever in the world. But that's how we jump. It's this great vision. Getting back to the vision. If you say to yourself, I'm going to become better at sales, I'm going to serve my customers better, because that's the essence of sales. You can be that tomorrow, not 6 months from there, not 6 years from now. You can be that tomorrow. Will you take one step in that direction and keep it? Because if you do, you're moving ahead. Even the expression, which I used to hate, 2 steps forward, 1 step back is progress. Depending on how much time you have, learn how to take 2 steps forward and stop going backwards.
Well, here's the other thing. You don't have to have some slick thing to say to the customers. You don't have to you don't have to do any of that. In fact, it's the worst thing you can do because they already expect that.
I'm sorry for laughing because as soon as you said that, Corey, I went to my dad. You remember I mentioned I was bad at sales and I wanted to get better, and my dad was great. And he was anything but what you would expect. He was quiet. And when he would sit in a call, because I would go with him, as he was talking like this loud, people would begin to lean in. And they just saw he had a huge smile on his face, and he would ask questions and he would make notes. But everyone who sat across from him knew that he was there for them. That was, if I can only tell you in 8 seconds what you should do. So anyway, I said to him, Dad, do you have a great closing line so I could be better at sales? And my dad looks at me and he starts to laugh. And I go, what's so funny? He goes, Al, if you need a great closing line, you've really been bad up to this point.
That's the truth. That's so true.
It's
true. It really is.
No.
Go ahead.
No, all I was going to say is I got to the point where you mentioned about I was so passionate that people would interrupt me as I was making my sales presentation. Go, you know what, Al, sounds great. How soon can we get started? You know what? I'll get to that in a minute. Let me finish this point.
I'm begging you to take their money.
Begging me to take their money right now.
That is so funny. That is so funny.
So
that was great. That was a great
active listening.
Oh, dude. It is one of the most important things. Look, there's 2 things that anybody listening to this call, if they were to do better today or tomorrow, let's say today, there's 2 things that you could do better today. Just learn how to be a good active listener, which just takes practice, and follow up on your damn leads.
Yes. When I would get into a sales slump, my dad always said to me, make 1 more call, stop by 1 more customer. But the analogy that I locked into my head is you're swinging a pickaxe at an iceberg and you're not getting anywhere. And you're entitled to feel like you want to quit. But you also have to remember 1 more swing might break this whole thing open. And that's what I was willing to do. And so many more talented people than me just got up against that iceberg and go, well, I'm done. And I never thought of myself as like super talented, but I knew what my super talent is. I'll still be going when you quit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not a common trait with people coming up either. I'll be honest. It's just not.
I have a mixed feeling on that because I train so many millennials all around the country. And when they know their why, because they're not going to just do stuff, but if you spend the time early on with them about why you do what you do and how it helps people and how they can get the future they want, they are not just good. They are phenomenally good. Listen to me, everyone I'm talking to here. Now, I haven't worked as much with the next Gen Ys and Gen X, but that is happening more. And I haven't found a break. It's pretty much the same thing. You better be really good about your why.
Once again, 1,000%. And look, that will work in any generation. Doesn't matter who
I
it is.
absolutely agree. Absolutely
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, 100% it will. Absolutely.
Yep.
But it takes patience. It takes good questions. It takes you wanting to spend some time with that individual to learn about that person, not so you could sit and talk to him.
Oh, 101. So what makes you think customers is the only place that applies? It applies to the people at your shop. It applies to your kids. It applies to your significant other. You know, shut off the microphones, what I was told, and open up the receivers.
100%. Yeah. So many people get that wrong. And it's fascinating whenever somebody answers a question or answers me with something that is totally irrelevant. I just sit and think like, and sometimes people don't even know, right? They don't even know that they're answering you in this irrelevant way lots of times because of that, right? This is the biggest mind control device on the planet.
I make them turn their phone upside down or put it in a drawer because I always knew this was a distraction, but there was a great survey out about that. If your phone lights up and you don't even look at it because it's turned upside down, the next 20 minutes are gone.
Fact.
So you've got to set, what I teach in my time management class was you've got to set a time to tell people I'm going to check it at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. If you needed that done faster, you're going to have to figure out something else or do something in the middle. But that's the only way you're going to take, and I call it time blocking. You have to time block.
Absolutely. And that statistic is absolutely correct. So imagine just that stupid ding, right? Just that ding alone.
Oh, the ding. And I have mine on vibrate.
Yeah.
It doesn't
Do
matter.
not
It still
disturb.
lights upside down if I'm staring at it, which I have to put into, a different thing.
Yeah.
That's
I
really
keep
an
mine
issue.
on. I have to. I think
Yeah.
that statistic alone probably just seared it into my brain when I heard it several years ago. It's helped my focus tremendously doing that.
It's done the same thing with me. Is I keep the stuff closed, but I have a reminder that just pops up and says time to check the phone, email, text, or whatever. And and I'm not. You guys get pounded from every way, but as a company owner, the more you get people that report to you or to your managers to know what they need to do, you will start to get your life back, and they will feel more empowered. And that, yes, is org charts, manuals, staffing power, all the things that I still do and do online these days. It applies to you. So whoever you decide to go and find it or buy it from or make it yourself, it's the best work you will ever do.
People like to know if you're the boss and I'm working for you, I want to know you got a freaking plan if you're in charge of my checkbook. If you're in charge of my check, like.
Yeah. Well,
Really?
I chose to get in your car. So
Right.
why and where are we going?
Yes. One thing I want to point out before we wrap this up, and you said something really hit home that I hope if there's no telling how many contractor owners are out there listening. But if you could be that big brother, right? I don't mean big brother go out and get drunk, not that big brother. The big brother that, like we just said with the active listing and just taking an interest in them, something completely outside of work. It'll change the game for you. It'll change the game.
I think, it's people don't care what you do until you show them that you care. And so for me, it was, learning a balance. We're not born managers, especially if like I was a technician working in the field. What qualifications was that for me to be a manager? And when you appoint your best tech to all of a sudden be this field supervisor that I talk about, how did they become a boss? Well, they watched horrible bosses and they decide they're just going to be an SOB to everybody, or they're going to be everybody's buddy, and it's not either one. So there needs to be some training skills, but you need to work on your own leadership skills. I went to a lot of great training years and years ago, and I've read some of the best books out there. And then I learned and did my own self-debrief and how I could get better and better on it. And I was, measure the results, because that's the only way you do.
Yes. One of the things that I have people do that want to get better on video and camera or Zoom or whatever is I have them just do videos to themselves, 30 days. Have them do 30 days worth of videos, 5 takes a day, 20, 25 seconds. You don't have to do anything with it. massive change happens. Because you can see yourself.
And that I'm going to try and be respectful of the time here.
Yes.
So when we finally decided we had the manuals, we were building the training center, going to take this training in, my great friend Dan Hollahan says to me, who was a phenomenal speaker as well as knowing his subject, monster. I was very fortunate to have this great person be my influence. He goes, Al, the only way you're going to become a better trainer is you have to videotape yourself. So I was videotaping my class, Corey. I turned to write something on a whiteboard and I wrote for 15 minutes and never looked back. And the only reason they didn't throw anything at me is because I watched the video and I saw what I was doing and what my face looked like, I didn't even need somebody. I just began to self-correct every time I would run that thing. That's what made a difference.
100%. Yep. Well, Al, this has been a tremendous conversation.
It's been a lot of fun for me. I really always appreciate this perspective. And you know what, guys? I know we bounced all over the world here, but it was all good information because your business is not separate from you. Matter of fact, your 10 golden rules for your business need to be aligned with your 10 personal goals.
100%. Al, where can they find you?
You can find me at what you see here, the 7 Power Contractor. So the 7 numbers, powercontractor.com. And then I offer a free 30 if you guys go to connect with Al on that page at 7powercontractor.com. You're a contractor. Let me know you want to have a free 30. I'm happy to do it. It's my gift back to the industry.
And I will put that link in the show notes so you don't even have to go looking for it.
There you go.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks.